Hi, welcome back to Read Aloud. Today I'm reading Chapter 7 of Part 3. And in our reading yesterday, the professor agreed to try to make the Whangdoodle another Whangdoodle so he wouldn't be so lonely. Let's see how it's going along. At this point, a little bit of time has passed at the beginning of Chapter 7. Like a short amount of time. So, enjoy! The great hall of the palace had been turned into a laboratory. By some incredible means, the Proc had managed to obtain all the things the professor asked for. The professor was stunned when he entered the hall for the first time. The vast, normally empty room was now filled with the most modern scientific equipment, plus benches, chairs, blackboards, bottles, and tubes of every kind. But where did you get all of this? How could you possibly manage it? The Proc looked a little smug. I borrowed it. You borrowed it? From your laboratory at the university. What? Don't worry. I'll put it all back. You do your job. I'll do mine. The palace was bustling with excitement. Everyone had been advised of the remarkable experiment that was being conducted. As a result, the professor was given the utmost respect and attention. He began to work. The children wisely left him alone, but towards the end of the first day they did peek in on him just to make sure he was all right. They found him seated on a high stool with his head in his hands. Sheets of paper were scattered all over the floor. A wastepaper bin was full to overflowing, and the blackboard was covered with formulas. Lindy touched the professor's arm. Everything all right? She whispered. Oh, my dears, I'd quite forgotten about you. He seemed very distracted and rubbed his eyes wearily. I just don't seem to be able to get anywhere, he sighed. It'll take a miracle. It's a miracle that we're here, Tom reminded him. Yes, remember what you said about that, added Ben. You said that miracles only happen after a lot of endeavor. A mind has to be ready and open before a miracle can happen. But that's just it. That's the problem, replied the professor desperately. Right now, my mind isn't open. I've been sitting here thinking so hard. I realize now why I was unable to cross the bridge, why I couldn't see it. I was torn between two worlds. I was preoccupied with my forthcoming journey to Washington, and I was worried about finishing my paper. I always worry if my work is not completed, so the real world was fighting with the world of my imagination. My concentration was hopelessly ruined. Well, if you realize all that, can't you make it right? Ben said simply. The professor was annoyed. Do you have any idea of the magnitude you're asking for? I couldn't see the bridge, yet you're asking me to make a Whangdoodle. I know what you need, Lindy said in her practical voice. You need a scrappy cap. That's it, cried Tom. It would help you to concentrate. Great idea. Come on, we'll go ask the Proc about it. They rushed towards the door. No, children, wait, the professor called after them, but they had already gone. A short time later, the Proc arrived. He placed Lindy's bonnet on the workbench. Are you having a few problems? A few? That's a masterpiece of understatement. Well, try the bonnet. It might work. Oh, come on, my good fellow. The professor looked impatient. You know as well as I do that those hats mean nothing. They're not magic at all. They're not? Of course not. They're just a device. Something for the children to believe in, to help them bridge the gap. The Proc gave a small smile. Well, they obviously work very well for them. I wouldn't underestimate those hats if I were you. I don't follow you. It's quite simple. You say the hats are not magic, yet the fact is, without them, the children never would have believed enough to get to Whangdoodle Land. As you pointed out, by wearing the hats, they were able to bridge the gap. Obviously, you're having a lot of problems right now. You're trying to bridge a gap, too. It would seem to me that Miss Lindy had a sensible idea. Try the hat. What have you got to lose? The professor banged his fist on the table. But I'm telling you, the hats are just made up. There's nothing special about them. If you say so. The Proc was irritatingly calm. He eased himself to the door with his long, gliding walk. See you later. Proc, what if this experiment is a failure? Supposing I don't succeed? The Proc opened the door. I suggest we wait to see how you get on. If I don't make another Whangdoodle, you're not going to give us the hats, are you? You intend to keep us all here. You're not going to let us go at all. But how can I possibly keep you here? Said the Proc innocently. You just said that the hats mean nothing. I couldn't stop you from leaving. Yes, but you know, the children believe. Right now, the children are having a grand time, and I couldn't care less about going home. I suggest you stop worrying about them and concentrate on making a Whangdoodle for His Majesty. Plenty of time later to talk about going home. He quietly left the room. The professor stared after him and thought for the uptenth time that the Proc was a maddening fellow. He sighed deeply and looked at Lindy's hat on the workbench. He picked it up and turned it over in his hands. In the olden days, people really believed that magic came from the hat. They believed in the hat just as much as they believed in the Whangdoodle. Ben and Tom and Lindy certainly believed that the hats were the reason for their success. Was it possible? Could he have underestimated the scrappy caps? Were they magic after all? The professor considered the possibility and very slowly put the bonnet on his head and tied the ribbons beneath his chin. He sat still and waited. There was an uncanny light in the great hall, but he was used to that. His years of practice had taught him that at any period of sustained concentration brought with it a feeling of bright, strong light. The children had discovered that also. He looked around the laboratory at the familiar equipment, at his notes and all his equations. He rested his chin on his hands and thought about the Whangdoodle. Quite suddenly, it happened. A strange sensation crept over him. There was a feeling of lightness, as if a great weight was being lifted from his shoulders. He forgot about the children and the Proc, and then thoughts and ideas flooded into his mind like the water that raced down the hillsides to join the Golden River. The professor reached for a pad and pencil and began to write as fast as he could. Hours later, the big double doors to the great hall opened. The Whangdoodle peeped into the room. "Hi there," he said with a shy grin. "I couldn't keep away much longer. How's it all going?" The professor was wildly busy. Clouds of steam billowed from a pan at one end of the room. Several flasks containing colored liquids were bubbling noisily. The professor's spectacles were on the very tip of his nose. He was scribbling furiously on the blackboard. The Whangdoodle crept forward and peered over his shoulder. He made noises of appreciation. My word! You humans have come a long way since I was around. I confess, I haven't the slightest idea what you're doing." The professor grabbed a towel and rubbed the board frantically. "I sometimes wonder myself, Your Majesty. Now, if you'll excuse me..." "Oh, this is all so exciting," the Whangdoodle lisped happily. "I can't tell you how I appreciate this effort. So much seems to be happening. Have you seen my slippers?" He lifted a foot to show the professor. "I lost the pink ones just a little while ago, and look what's growing already. Aren't they sensational? Silver and gold with bells on. I've never grown bells before. I can only surmise that it's due to the anticipation." The professor put both hands to his head. "Your Majesty, I really have to concentrate." Yes. Oh, of course you do. Oh, goodness, I hope you will succeed. I can't eat, I just can't. I must confess that even in the old days when there were more of us, I seldom had the company of a lady Whangdoodle. The humans kept us so busy, you see. At one time they loved us very much, and we loved them, and I'll tell you a secret, I miss them a great deal. It's been a very lonely place these past 500 years. You can understand my anxiety about this experiment." "I can, Your Majesty, but there won't be any experiment if I don't have a little bit of peace and quiet." Yes, okay, I was just going. Is there anything that I can do?" "Just try to keep everyone away from the great hall for a while." "Oh, I will. "Sire, Please don't get too excited. This may not work. I'm trying to do something, but it could fail, the professor cautioned. Come, a little perseverance. The Whangdoodle slapped the professor on the back. Keep up the good work. I just know you can do it. You're a splendid fellow. Splendid. He bounced to the door. You will send for me the moment that something happens? Yes, Your Majesty. And you're really on to something? Yes, Your Majesty. Oh, I can't stand it. I may suffocate with excitement. I'll leave you more. Pack some more at Lepos and Canido. Goodbye. Goodbye. The professor turned away. The Whangdoodle popped his head around the door again. Oh, and just one more thing. The professor sighed with exasperation. That silly hat looks simply stunning on you. The Whangdoodle grinned and disappeared. The entire palace became a place of hushed anticipation and expectation. The inhabitants crept around, speaking in whispers, not daring to make a sound in case it disturbed the professor. The children spent a lot of time exploring. The Proc showed them the Whangdoodle's private apartments, the fabulous royal kitchens. There was a special pantry just for wodge making. Is wodge the only thing that the Whangdoodle eats? Lindy asked. Good heavens, no, replied the Proc. He adores olives. He'll eat them by the ton. Once in a while, he'll take a piece of broccoli as well. Broccoli? Ugh, how gross, Lindsay grimaced. The children discovered that the head chef in the kitchen was none other than the Oink. They watched him making a fresh batch of wodge. He looked very efficient in his tall chef's hat, but he sang mournfully, Sweets for a sweet tooth, confections for the royal. Put it in a saucepan and leave it there to boil. The Proc patted the Oink on the shoulder. Keep up the good work. His Majesty is delighted with the cooking. He winked at the children and then whispered, He is awfully vague at times, but there's not a better wodge maker in the country. The Oink said solemnly, Watch out for yesterday. It'll catch up with you every time. The children learned how the palace was organized. The household chores were carried out by hundreds of penguin-like creatures called jiffies. They were always running frantically around the palace. They seemed terribly busy. The Proc explained that it was not in a jiffy's nature to walk, which was why they made for such great, efficient palace help. You see, they get things done in half the time, and that leaves them plenty of time to play, which is something they love to do. Oh, the Proc said that. You see, they get things done in half the time, and that leaves them plenty of time to play, which is something they love to do. Cute. The other important members of the palace staff were the little fluffy flukes. They were the couriers for the Whangdoodle. They ran errands and generally made themselves useful. Tom asked if he could visit the Wiffle Bird. He found her curled up on a pillow in a small, cheerful room. She looked so tiny and fragile, and her colors were dull as she lay listless and alone. But the moment she saw Tom, she brightened considerably. Hello, Wiffle Bird. We've all been so worried about you. How are you feeling? She fluffed her feathers and began to make small crooning noises. Tom knelt down and stroked her fondly. He saw the tiny hands come through the waving plumes and the black button eyes staring up at him. I do hope you'll be well enough to go out and about soon. It's lonely without you, you know. His words seemed to work wonders, for she began to strut up and down and behave much like her old self. I'll come back and visit again if you promise to get well soon. Is that a deal? At this, she seemed very content and settled into a corner to rest. Tom left the room feeling much happier. After worrying so much about the Wiffle Bird, it was good to know that she was on the road to recovery. The Whangdoodle sent for the children often, and they spent long hours with him. They were wonderful hours, for he was the most gracious and fun-loving host. He was thrilled and stimulated by their visits, yet at times his mind was obviously elsewhere. Under the circumstances, it wasn't hard to guess that His Majesty was most anxiously waiting to hear from the professor. The weather became very cloudy and still, and late one afternoon it began to rain. Slowly at first, large drops splashing against the crystal walls and running down in shivering rivulets. The wind rose and the rain came down harder. The Proc hurried to the salon where the Whangdoodle was having tea and watched with the children. There was a rumble of thunder up ahead. The Proc spoke with restrained excitement. "Your Majesty, it hasn't rained in years. Not like this. Do you know what this could mean?" I know, my good fellow. I was thinking the same thing. Ha ha ha. The Whangdoodle began to tremble and rose unsteadily to his feet. "Oh my goodness, do you suppose that?" He gulped and was unable to finish his sentence. The Proc seemed to be listening for something. In olden days, we believed that a storm such as this was an omen. Something out of the ordinary is going to happen. I am quite sure of it. The thunder rumbled once more, and the wind chimes in the courtyard sang an eerie song. Over the sound came another sound, a faint chattering noise that brought the children to their feet as it grew louder and louder. The Proc strode to the big double doors and flung them open. The noise was almost deafening. Running towards him down the corridor were all the members of the royal household. They were all chattering and tripping and falling over each other in haste and excitement. The Jiffies were all screaming, "It's done, Your Majesty, it's done, it's done, it's done!" "Come and see, come and see, come and see!" cried the little Flukes. They tugged at the Whangdoodle's slipper. "Hurry, hurry, Your Majesty!" Sidewindlers thrashed through the crowd, waving their trunks in the air and yelling, "The professor says to come straight away! Yes, straight away!" Everybody shouted at once. Ben cried in triumph, "He's done it! He's done it!" The Whangdoodle turned bright red and leaned momentarily against the Proc. He clutched his stomach. Then, regaining control, he began to gallop towards the great hall. The Jiffies and the Sidewindlers and the Flukes fell back to allow him room, but the moment he had passed, the big crowd followed close ranks after him. Tom, Ben, and Lindy found themselves being swept along. In their excitement, they unashamedly pushed and shoved until they were at the head of the crowd and close behind the Whangdoodle. He skidded to a halt just inside the doors of the great hall. As abruptly as the noise had begun, it died away. In the hushed, expectant silence, a weary and exhausted Professor Savant walked forward to greet the Whangdoodle. "Your Majesty," he said, and the children knew that it was hard for him to control his excitement. "There is someone I would like you," I got excited, "to meet." He stepped to one side. A gasp of astonishment rose from the crowd. Seated on a white silk cushion in the center of the room, looking at everyone with much curiosity, was a smaller, daintier, and undeniably feminine replica of the Whangdoodle. She was the color of a fawn. Her eyes were large and soft with long curling lashes. On her head were small antlers which she wore like a crown. Her front hooves were crossed delicately on a pillow, and her back hooves were covered by a pair of tiny satin slippers. She was breathtakingly beautiful. She caught sight of the king and blinked with surprise, and then smiled to reveal one sweet tooth with a daisy on it. In a voice that suggested the softest murmurings of a harp, she whispered, "Dum-ba-dee-dum-dum-dum." The Whangdoodle stood still, momentarily stunned. He turned every color of the rainbow, and then his legs buckled underneath him, and he fainted. That's the end of chapter 7. He did it. The professor did it. Now the Whangdoodle is not alone. He's not the only Whangdoodle left in the world. He's not the last really great Whangdoodle. Wow. There's still 2 more chapters, so tune in next time. See ya.